on a couple things that we've learned over the 2 years. And it's based on the fact that I've watched us blow that election in Indiana that I just told you about. We've blown elections in, let's see, where were some of the earlier primaries? We blew the elections in Arkansas that way. Then I've seen some successes. We got 22 out of 42 candidates in California through the primaries. I was very happy with that. We managed to get Bob Bennett out, which was important to me, and that actually gave me a lot of hope, because when Chaffetz won, we've been hearing from a lot of people across the country who say that was a fluke. And it's a fluke because you're the reddest state in the nation anyway. And it's just one small district, and it happens to be the most conservative district in Utah. And when you get to a Senate election, that fluke's going to go out the window, because now you're going to really see what money can do. You know, because Bennett outspent all the other candidates 20-1. You know, not just 6-1. He spent them out 20-1. And he's going to have the connections, and, you know, he's a much wiser campaigner. He's not going to get caught with his pants down. This, you know, he's already stated that he knows, you know, that you guys are out there. And so when we beat him, that gave me a lot of hope, because we showed it wasn't a fluke, and we pulled that off. So having said that, here's my personal opinion. I don't believe that in 2010 we will have enough members or have spread this message around enough to truly make a great difference. And I'll define great difference in a minute. Well, I'll define it right now. I want to see a 40% turnover in the House. And there's a reason people say, well, why do you say 40%? I say, because we haven't seen a 40% turnover since the late 1800s. That's what I want to see. I want to see a 40% turnover in the House. I don't think we're going to see that this year in 2010. I just don't think we have enough members who are unified. And by members, I don't mean iCaucus members. I'm talking the patriotic groups. I don't think there's enough of us who are unified enough to make that kind of sea change happen in 2010. However, I do believe that we will have a lot of success in 2010. It's going to be a good year for our side, I believe. Historically, when Jimmy Carter went off the tracks in the 70s, you know, 1980 was a real good year for Republicans. When the last time that they held the House, the Senate, and the Oval Office was when Bill Clinton got elected, and 94 was a good year for Republicans. I think you're going to see a good year this year just because of what the Democrats are doing, not because of, you know, we're not unified yet, but they're doing enough to outrage enough people. I think it's going to be a good year. So I'm optimistic for that. What I'm more optimistic about is all of the organizing we're doing now in 2010. As long as we move forward with that, we start working for our candidates right away in January, February of 2011, 2012, I believe we'll see a sea change. I think it'll be a huge sea change in 2012. And I look at it, here's what I tell people. You win anything in 2010, count it as a bonus and be very grateful and do everything you can to win those seats in 2010. But if you don't win them, don't get discouraged, because you're building the foundation right now that you're going to roll into to 2012. And the other side has been building, you know, the other side, when we talk about having these cottage meetings, and when I say, actually, this was really interesting. I talked to somebody yesterday whose brother-in-law is the chief of the Communist Party in Chile, okay? His sister her brother is the communist chief in Chile. And after I did my presentation, he came up to me and he says, what you just described, your idea of setting up iCaucus so that all the groups can put on their iCaucus hat to endorse but then go back to their thing, is what the communists have been doing for years. They've been doing it because they have all these little cells out there that have no connection with each other, except they all come together when they need to get united to get something pushed through or get a candidate pushed through. He says, you're proposing that same kind of grassroots thing. What you're proposing isn't new, and I know it's not new. But they've been doing this for years and years and years. And we're waking up and we're finally angry about it, and now we start doing it. I think we're laying the right tracks for 2012.
Thank you for your person.
Thank you. I hope, you know. Okay. Yeah.
Everything you've been talking about is extremely complicated, and I think we've gotten here over a period of decades. And I'm sort of a simple man, and I've always thought that maybe there would be just 2 or 3 things we could do to really get things turned around. And I've always heard and thought that term limits would practically take care of every situation I could think of. And I haven't even heard you mention term limits.
Thank
I
you.
guess I'm to assume that what you've implemented or going to implement is kind of an accountability thing.
It's all, yeah, we need to be accountable on all of our candidates, yes. But term limits, here's the thing, there's actually 3 reasons term limits I haven't talked about. Number one, when we set up our 80 questions and decided the things that were going to go into the vetting, term limits was not something that was brought up or carried by 70% of the members. So the short answer is our members didn't choose to include term limits. That's one answer. Second answer that I don't talk about term limits is personally, it's not in the Constitution. So since we're focused on fiscal responsibility through adherence to the Constitution, it's not something that right now I personally would have advocated we promote right now. I want to get back to the Constitution, and now let's look at it. Now personally, term limits can't hurt. I would, if anybody proposed term limits, I'm there with you. And I'm there, and personally I'm with it. But the third reason is, and if you've been here for the whole thing and saw the whole thing, okay. The third thing is I don't think it solves the systemic problem, because the systemic problem is when I just described what happens within 48 hours of a freshman showing up. If you have term limits, you're going to have freshmen showing up, more freshmen showing up, who are still going to get that visit from the House leadership and who are still going to get told that same story and still going to get told, look, you're going to come in, we're going to help you, we're going to get you the talking points, they're going to raise the money for you. And if you don't have a candidate who's aware of the problem and who is committed not to be part of that problem, they're going to get sucked into that. They'll get sucked into it for 2 terms or whatever the term limit is, and then a new one will come in and get sucked in. And that's for me, even if we had term limits, it wouldn't stop me from advocating all of these things. I would say we got to change the system. Term limits or no term limits.
How are they treating Jason if he reacted the way you say?
Well, that's really interesting because let me tell you how I knew ahead of time before Jason told me about that experience. I knew ahead of time that was going to happen. My father was the head of the Middle East Bureau in the CIA underneath George Bush, the first George Bush, and till 1996 under Clinton, and then he retired. And when he retired, he's been hired by a lot of lobbying firms over the years to advise them on things in the Middle East, right? And they love having names like that on their mastheads, so when they go get clients, they got these people. So as my dad has been working with these lobbyists, he's the one who's been telling me a lot of how they work. He was the one who first opened my eyes to what was happening. And he was the one, he told me if Chaffetz wins, doesn't matter because, the House leadership is going to tell him how it's going to work. And he says, and if they don't come and visit him in 48 hours or he won't play ball, he says he won't be there very long because they'll give him no support whatsoever. He'll get his bills, nobody's going to co-sponsor him, he'll get no support whatsoever. Well, Jason got elected, and Jason did have that meeting with the House membership, and he did tell him, I can't do it. But I think it was, the best thing that ever happened to him is that the media outlets picked up on that cot in the office, sleeping on the cot story, and they ran with that. And then, I don't know if you remember, but Stephen Colbert asked him to come on the show, and then because he was a place kicker, got him to do the leg wrestle thing. The media kind of took it like a joke. But what it did, because when Jason got out there and he's as outspoken as he is, he got a platform. And then Glenn Beck had him on, and Neil Cavuto, and suddenly had a platform to where the Republican Party couldn't marginalize him. And so when they put him on the Government Oversight Committee, that's kind of a dead-end committee, and he used it to tell Beck about the Acorn stories and things like that. He's pretty much transcended the party just because he's found that platform to speak on. And what I'm encouraged about is because Jason has done that now, if Bill Randall gets elected and goes back to Washington, if they try to marginalize him, I know he's got at least one friend he can go to, actually a couple of them, Jason Chaffetz, Michelle Bachmann, Jim DeMint. There's a couple people that will welcome Bill Randall with open arms, even if the Republican Party shuns him. So I'm very optimistic about that. But normally that's what they do. They basically, if you don't play ball, they don't work with you. They don't give you the talking points, and they don't co-sponsor your bills. The greatest example of that is Jeff Flake in Arizona, who has been arguing against earmarks for almost as a lone wolf, a lone voice in the wilderness for 10 years. If you look at the amount of legislation that he's been able to get to the floor It's very little because he gets no help whatsoever from the House leadership. Oh, actually, before we go to the next question, I have to tell you, one of my favorite answers that Dan Eichenbaum gave, the question was, well, what can you possibly do in Washington to make a difference? And I'm going to paraphrase you the best I can remember the answer, Dan, so you correct me if I say it wrong. But he said, I'll hold a press conference every single day, open press conference, and they can do their best to ignore me, but I'll have steps of the Capitol every day, and somebody will have to pay attention to me sooner or later. I'm not going to just sit silent and let them not walk over me. I love that answer.
I think this sounds like a really wonderful process. My big question is, where do we get the candidates to support in this?
Great question. That is a great question because one of the most important things about starting early, there's a side benefit to starting early. Usually you'll get one good candidate that you can get behind early, and then later on when other good candidates start thinking about it, they'll see, oh, that candidate's in there, and they'll think about running for a different office rather than jumping into the race where they've already built a base, right? So it is very important to find those candidates early. It actually eliminates a lot of the splintering that comes later on when you wait too long. We find our good candidates in a lot of places, and I'm just there's no magic bullet answer, but the real answer is you already know who the good candidates are, and or you'll stumble across them as you're just being active. You run into the candidates and you go, have you had a chance to talk to B.J. Lawson? Have you had a chance to talk to Bill Randall? We found this candidate. A lot of people were in Utah. We approached Mike Lee and asked him to run just because we knew him and he was doing a series of seminars on the Constitution. Morgan Philpott, we got to know him. He's our endorsed candidate in a second. And we asked him to run because he basically was a member of the Republican Party, and he was getting shunned a lot in the Central Committee meetings because he was speaking the non-party line, which is money doesn't matter, let's stand on principle. And so he caught our attention, and we asked him if he would run at the 2nd District. I think in Connecticut,
We drafted Peter Schiff.
okay,
He was popular and he was known among he's a financial planner and he's an economist. We drafted Peter Schiff in Connecticut because he was well known. He's an economist. He owns a business, a big financial business, and he was known in more of the grassroots circles. And he would go to some of the tea parties and he would go to the functions, and everyone was just always saying to him, why don't you run, why don't you run? And he's like, well, I don't know. And we drafted him, we just talked him into it little by little by little. We hammered him until he finally said, okay, I'll do it. And so he has now suspended being part of his company, and he is running for Senate in Connecticut.
and the reason I knew to point, Carol's been one of the iCaucus members, one of the original ones way back in the day up in Connecticut before she moved down here.
I've been an
so-
iCaucus member for probably a year and a half, maybe. Not quite a year and a half. And I'm one of the original founders of the Danbury, Connecticut 912 group. There were 3 of us. And I've been a part of iCaucus since right after that. And I've seen the vetting process. It works really well. I've seen the whole process work. I've not participated in it as fully as I should be or should have, but it is awesome and it works. It works.
Yeah, and a lot of and then there'll be candidates who approach you, and they'll especially start approaching you as in your groups, your 912 groups and Tea Party groups, and iCaucus. They'll approach you. Actually, we have a bonus where, for example, any candidate who went through the process in 2010 and wants to run in 2012.
Holding